My son-in-law slid a thick folder across the dining room table and smiled like he was offering me dessert instead of an ultimatum. "Sign it," he said, "or you won't see your grandchildren again." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. Perfect timing. Andre's smile faltered. Across from him, my daughter whispered so quietly I almost did not hear it. "Dad, don't do this." I looked from the message on my phone back to Andre. Then I folded my hands on the table. Too late. It was Thursday evening, just after 7. The October sun had already dropped behind the hills along the Ohio River, leaving the windows of Andre and Keisha's house dark enough to reflect all 4 of us around the dining table. Well, 3 of us. The children had been sent upstairs 20 minutes earlier. That alone felt strange. Normally, Malik would still be trying to talk me into one more round of cards before bedtime, and Zuri would be walking around with that stuffed rabbit she carried like it had its own social security number. Instead, the downstairs felt unnaturally quiet. The television murmured in the family room. No one was watching it. The dining table had been cleared completely. No dessert, no coffee cups, just a leather folder, 2 expensive pens, and a yellow legal pad. Andre had poured me bourbon before I sat down. He knew I drank iced tea after dinner. I had not touched the glass. Keisha kept rubbing the edge of her wedding ring with her thumb. Back and forth, back and forth. She had been doing it all through dinner. I noticed. I just had not understood why. Andre leaned forward with the polished smile he used whenever he wanted people to trust him. "You've worked hard your whole life, Jerome." I hated when he used my first name. For years, he had called me Dad. Now it was Jerome. "You should not have to worry about maintaining that lake house anymore." "I don't," he laughed politely. "I know you think that." Think, not know. Think. "There are docks to repair," he continued. "Insurance premiums, property taxes, medical emergencies. You're 63 now." "I'm aware. If something happened while you were out there alone..." He let the sentence trail off. Keisha finally looked up. "Andre." He held up one finger without taking his eyes off me. "I just want him protected." I looked at my daughter. She looked back down. Andre opened the folder. Inside sat a stack of neatly organized documents. "The easiest solution," he said, "is transferring the lake property into a family LLC." He pushed the papers toward me. "Keisha will always have access. The grandchildren eventually inherit it. Everybody wins." I picked up the first page. Years of reading contracts had taught me one habit: never rush, never assume. Read every word. Andre probably expected me to skim. Instead, I read quietly and slowly. The first page looked ordinary enough. The second did not. By the third page, I found what I was looking for. Management authority, sole manager, Andre Whitfield. Not Keisha. Andre. I looked up. "You said Keisha would control it." "Practically speaking, yes." "That is not what this says. It's just legal language." "No." I tapped the page. "It is very specific legal language." For the first time all evening, his smile tightened. "You're focusing on details that do not matter." "Details usually matter." Keisha stopped rubbing her ring. Andre inhaled slowly. "I really hoped this would not become difficult." "So did I." He leaned back. "Look, the lender needs everything finalized tonight." "The lender?" His eyes widened for half a second. "Barely noticeable, but noticeable." "You said family planning," I said. "It is. You did not mention borrowing against the property. It's temporary." "Temporary for what?" "A business matter." "What business matter?" He sighed dramatically. "This is exactly what I was worried about." "What?" "You do not understand how modern financial planning works." I almost laughed. Instead, I read another page. Then another. The more I read, the less I liked what I saw. "This LLC was formed recently." "Yes." "When?" "A couple of weeks ago." "You did not think to mention it?" "We're mentioning it now." I closed the folder. "I'm not signing anything tonight." The room became still. Andre's pleasant expression disappeared. He folded his hands. "I don't think you understand what is happening." "Then explain it." His voice lost every trace of warmth. "If you refuse..." He paused long enough to make sure I was looking directly at him. You won't be seeing Malik or Zuri anymore. Silence. Not angry silence. The kind that settles over a room before something breaks. Keisha closed her eyes. I stared at Andre. He did not blink. He meant it. You would use the children. I'm protecting my family. They are my family too. They are my children. I looked toward the staircase. I could almost hear Zuri's little feet running across the hallway upstairs. Andre lowered his voice. They are young enough to stop asking questions after a while. That sentence hurt more than the threat itself, because he believed it. My phone vibrated against the table. Andre frowned. I glanced down. A text from Naomi Carter. The LLC was opened 11 days ago. Andre is sole manager. Call me. I could not help smiling. Perfect timing. Andre looked confused. Keisha was not. She stared at my phone, then at me. Color drained from her face. Dad, she swallowed. Don't do this. Andre smirked. I appreciate you trying to keep the peace. He completely misunderstood why she had said it. I did not. Keisha knew exactly who Naomi was. She had met her years earlier. She also remembered what happened when I investigated corporate fraud before I retired. I had not yelled. I had not threatened anyone. I simply kept asking questions until people started answering them. Sometimes they answered with documents, sometimes with lies. Either way they answered. I slipped my phone into my pocket and looked directly at Andre. Too late. Then I stood. I'm leaving. He rose so quickly his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. So that's it for tonight? For tonight. You'll regret this. Maybe. I picked up my jacket. Keisha finally looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. She did not say another word. I wish she had. Anything. Don't go. I'm sorry. Help me. Instead, nothing. Andre followed me to the front door. You know what lonely old men do? I turned. What? They confuse control with love. I waited. You've always used money to keep Keisha close. I opened the door. Cold October air rushed inside. No, I said quietly. I just never thought someone she married would try using my grandchildren the same way. His jaw tightened. I walked outside. Behind me, the front door slammed shut. As I reached my truck, I heard a little voice from upstairs. Mom, is Grandpa leaving already? Zuri. Then another voice. When's he coming back? Malik. The door closed before I could answer. Driving across the bridge towards Cincinnati, I replayed the evening again and again. Sunday dinners had slowly disappeared. Fishing trips had been canceled. Andre answered Keisha's phone more often than she did. She started asking his permission before making small purchases. I had noticed every change. I had simply convinced myself not to interfere. Maybe she was busy. Maybe marriage changed people. Maybe patience was better than pushing. Now I was not so sure. By the time I reached my house in Anderson Township, the bourbon smell from Andre's dining room had finally faded from my jacket. I placed the unsigned folder on my kitchen table beside Lillian's framed photograph. My late wife always knew when I was about to throw myself into something dangerous. Sometimes I still caught myself expecting her to walk into the room, look at my face, and tell me to slow down before I turned a problem into a mission. The phone rang. Naomi. I dug deeper, she said. What did you find? The LLC is not the interesting part. What is? She hesitated. It appears your son-in-law needs your lake house as collateral before Monday morning. I looked toward the refrigerator. Malik and Zuri smiled from a photo taken at the lake the previous summer, each holding a fishing rod almost as tall as they were. What kind of trouble is he in? Naomi asked. I kept looking at that picture. I don't know yet. Then I quietly answered the question already forming in my own mind. But he just gave me 4 days to find out. I woke before sunrise the next morning, not because I had slept well. I had not. The house made different sounds after Lillian passed away. 28 years together had taught me exactly how she moved through a room. Even now, 4 years after losing her, there were mornings when an old floorboard creaked, and my heart still expected to hear her humming in the kitchen. Instead, there was only the coffee maker. I filled my favorite blue mug, grabbed my jacket, and drove to the diner I had visited nearly every Friday for 15 years. The waitress smiled before I sat down. "Morning, Mr. Ellis." "Morning, Carmen." "The usual." "You already know." She laughed. "2 eggs over easy, rye toast, crispy bacon, coffee black." "You've got a better memory than I do." She poured coffee into my mug. "That's because you haven't changed your order since my youngest was in middle school." I chuckled. "Fair enough." Around me, the diner filled with familiar faces. A retired firefighter reading yesterday's newspaper. 2 women discussing a church bake sale. 3 construction workers already covered in drywall dust before 7:30. Nobody looked twice at me. I like that. For most of my career, people underestimated me because I looked ordinary. That was not an accident. I learned long ago that people reveal more around someone they consider harmless. Executives twice my salary would talk freely while I quietly stirred coffee. Employees who distrusted lawyers would tell me everything because I sounded more like a neighbor than an investigator. Boards never hired me because I intimidated people. They hired me because I listened. Carmen returned with my breakfast. "You okay?" "What makes you ask?" "You've only looked at your eggs twice." I smiled. "Family stuff." She nodded knowingly. "That's usually harder than work." She was not wrong. When I got home, Naomi's SUV was already pulling into my driveway. She climbed out carrying 2 canvas bags stuffed with folders and a laptop. Same gray hair, same practical boots. Same expression she had worn for 30 years whenever someone brought her a problem before bringing her evidence. She did not hug me. She never had. "You look terrible." "Good morning to you too." "You didn't sleep enough." "Liar." She walked inside without waiting for an invitation. Some friendships eventually stopped needing formalities. She spread paperwork across my dining room table. "I'll say this once. I am not reopening old habits because your son-in-law insulted you. He threatened my grandchildren." She looked up. "Did he?" I frowned. "You don't believe me?" "I believe that's what you're telling me." She tapped the folder. "I don't believe documents either. I verify documents." That was Naomi. She trusted evidence before emotion. It had saved both of us more than once. I handed her the folder from Andre. She adjusted her reading glasses. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. Pages turned. Keys clicked. She highlighted sections with a yellow marker. Finally, she leaned back. "The transfer language is clean." I noticed. "But the timing isn't." "I noticed that too." She pointed toward one paragraph. "This LLC was created 11 days ago." "I know." "You also noticed Andre listed himself as sole manager." "I did." She nodded once. "Good. What aren't you saying?" "I'm saying we still don't know whether he is reckless or criminal." "What's the difference?" "The amount of proof." Around noon, we sat on my back porch overlooking the trees. Leaves drifted into the yard. October had always been Lillian's favorite month. Naomi sipped coffee. "Did you ever tell Andre exactly what you used to do?" "No." "What about Keisha?" "She knew enough." Naomi smiled faintly. "I still remember bringing her cookies after school." "So do I." Keisha had been 16 when she wandered into my office one Saturday while I was reviewing payroll reports from a manufacturing company near Dayton. Boxes covered the floor, charts hung across the walls. She looked around and asked what teenagers always ask. "What exactly do you do?" I laughed. "I look for things people don't want found." Back then, I had been investigating missing payroll money. Everyone blamed the chief financial officer. The numbers pointed at him. So did several employees. The board fired him before my report was finished. 3 months later, I found what I should have caught sooner. The evidence had been manipulated. The real thief was a senior executive who knew exactly how to redirect suspicion. The CFO eventually cleared his name. Too late. His marriage ended. His reputation never fully recovered. I never forgot the look on his face when he thanked me for finally proving he had not stolen anything. He was not grateful. He was exhausted. "You still carry that case," Naomi said quietly. "I should." "You weren't the one who forged the records. I was the one who believed them too quickly." She did not argue. She knew better. That mistake changed the way I worked forever. Never decide first and prove later. I looked toward the trees. If Andre is innocent, then I protect him too. Exactly. Naomi closed her notebook. That's why I agreed to come. Andre moved faster than I expected. By Friday afternoon, my cousin Leon called. You doing all right, Jerome? I think so. Heard you've been struggling a little. What does that mean? Long pause. I don't know. Andre said you've been forgetting things. Interesting. An hour later, a former neighbor called. You should really talk to somebody about grief. I've talked about grief. No, I mean professionally. By evening, I had received 4 calls, each one polite, each one asking whether I was sleeping enough, whether retirement had been harder than expected, whether I had been confused lately. Andre was not just trying to pressure me, he was preparing witnesses, building a story, old widower, lonely, forgetful, paranoid. It was subtle. That made it dangerous. Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I opened the message. Dad, I chose him. This is my mess. Please don't make the children pay for my mistake. Keisha, I read it once, then again, then a third time. Every sentence seemed to carry 2 meanings. Was she asking me to stop? Or asking me to save her without making it obvious? I started typing. Come home. Deleted it. Are you safe? Deleted that too. Finally, I locked my phone and set it on the kitchen counter. Sometimes saying nothing requires more strength than saying the wrong thing. Just before sunset, Naomi called. I found something. Keyboard clicks sounded in the background. What? The private lender tied to Andre's LLC. What about it? They've filed liens against 3 different investment companies over the past 2 years. They specialize in emergency collateral loans. My stomach tightened. How much? Andre's application requests $600,000. I stared through the window toward my backyard. The lake house. Yes. Silence settled between us. Then Naomi spoke again. Jerome. What? There is something worse. I gripped the phone harder. The disclosure packet says you already agreed to transfer the property. I most certainly have not. I know. She paused. The application includes your signature. I closed my eyes. That's impossible. I've compared it to older documents. It resembles yours. Resembles? Close enough that most people would not question it. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That always happened when something serious became undeniable. Panic never solved anything. Facts did. I never signed those papers. I know. Then someone used my name. That's exactly what I'm telling you. I looked at Lillian's photograph on the bookshelf. Yesterday, this had been a family argument. Now it looked a lot more like a crime. By Monday morning, my lake house was not the first thing on my mind anymore. It was my name. For 40 years, I protected it carefully, not because I cared about reputation for its own sake, but because trust takes decades to earn and minutes to lose. If someone was willing to forge my signature, they were gambling that no one would question whether I had really agreed. That bothered me more than the property itself. At 9 sharp, I parked outside a brick office building in downtown Cincinnati. Elliot Reeves had handled Lillian's estate after she passed. I always appreciated that he explained legal problems without making ordinary people feel stupid. He greeted me with a firm handshake. You picked a rough way to start the week. I've had worse Mondays. You probably have. He led me into a conference room overlooking Fountain Square. I placed the deed, the loan paperwork, and Naomi's notes on the table. He spent nearly half an hour reading without interruption. Finally, he removed his glasses. The good news? I could use some. This deed hasn't transferred anything. I exhaled slowly. So we're done. No. He slid another document toward me. The forged disclosure is a different matter. Explain. The deed requires proper execution, notarization, and recording before ownership changes. I know. But this, he tapped the loan package. This is evidence someone represented that you had already agreed, which I did not. Exactly. He leaned back. If the lender relied on this document, we are now discussing possible fraud. The word hung in the room. Fraud. Not misunderstanding. Not family conflict. Fraud. Elliot reached for a yellow legal pad. Here is what you need to do immediately. He wrote while speaking. Freeze every available credit line connected to the lake property. I nodded. Record notice with the county so no unauthorized transfer slips through. Another note. Update your state documents. Already planned. One more thing. What? Do not confront Andre. I almost laughed. That might be difficult. I don't care how satisfying it feels. He looked directly at me. Document everything. No arguments, no shouting, no threats. Especially no threats. He paused. The law rewards patience more often than anger. I folded the list and slipped it into my jacket. I can do patient. I know. Andre apparently had other plans. Wednesday afternoon, a certified envelope arrived. I recognized the county court seal before I opened it. Inside was a petition requesting temporary authority over my financial decisions. I read every page twice, then a third time. According to Andre, I suffered from memory decline, emotional instability, paranoia involving family members, poor judgment, and difficulty understanding legal documents. He even claimed I had begun making reckless financial decisions. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because I could not believe how carefully he had built the story. Every concerned phone call, every casual suggestion that grief had changed me. This had not started at dinner. It had started weeks earlier, maybe months. Near the back of the packet sat another document. Keisha's name appeared under a statement supporting concerns about my decision-making. No clear signature page, no explanation, just her name. I stared at it for a long time. Was it really hers? Or another document she had signed without reading? I honestly did not know. What I did know was this. For the first time in my life, someone was asking a court whether I could still manage my own affairs. Friday morning found me sitting in a medical office waiting room. The woman behind the reception desk could not have been older than 30. She smiled kindly. "Mr. Ellis?" I stood. "Right this way." The cognitive evaluation took almost an hour. Simple questions. What day is today? Who is the current governor? Count backward from 100. Remember these 5 words. Draw a clock. Repeat a sentence. Identify common objects. The young psychologist conducting the evaluation remained professional from beginning to end. She never treated me like a child. Still, I hated every minute. Not because the questions were difficult, because I understood exactly why I was answering them. When you have spent your whole life making decisions for yourself, proving you are still capable feels strangely humiliating. At one point, she asked gently, "How are you feeling during all this?" I answered honestly, like I'm defending something I never imagined I'd have to defend. She nodded. "I hear that more often than you might think." Walking back to my truck afterward, I realized something uncomfortable. Andre had not just attacked my property, he had attacked the one thing aging people fear losing most: credibility. I had not even started the engine when my phone rang. "Walter Price?" "Jerome," he said, his voice smaller than usual. "You home?" "I can be. We'd like to stop by." An hour later, Walter and Alma sat at my kitchen table. Walter looked 10 years older than the last time I had seen him. Alma smiled warmly. "Lillian makes the best peach pie." Neither of us corrected her. Walter gently squeezed his wife's hand. Early dementia. I knew she had been struggling. Hearing her forget Lillian had died still hurt. Walter opened a grocery store folder filled with account statements. "I don't understand these anymore." I looked down. Andre's company logo appeared across the top. "He said everything was safe." "Who?" "Andre." My stomach tightened. Walter rubbed his forehead. "He convinced us to move most of our retirement savings into something called a secured income fund." "How long ago?" "About 18 months. "You've been receiving payments?" "We were." "They stopped?" He nodded. "What explanation did he give?" "Delays, temporary." "He promised it would be fixed." Alma looked toward the hallway. "Will Lillian be joining us?" Walter's shoulders sagged. I quietly poured her another cup of tea. She thanked me with the same smile she had worn for decades. Walter stared at the paperwork. "We trusted him because—" He could not finish. "I know," I said, "because he was family." Those words landed harder than anything Andre had said. People had trusted him because they trusted me. Without realizing it, My reputation had become part of his sales pitch. That evening, Naomi arrived carrying a laptop and several printed spreadsheets. I've compared Walter's statements with public filings. She spread everything across my dining table. Colored sticky notes marked dozens of pages. Look here. Rows of account numbers, transfer dates, wire references. This account receives deposits, she pointed, then sends money here. Another arrow. Then here. Another. It keeps moving. Why? She looked up. Because the money is not staying invested. What does that mean? It means new deposits appear to fund older withdrawal requests. Silence. I already knew where she was going. She continued anyway. Some assets listed on these statements do not appear to exist. I slowly sat down. Naomi. She nodded. I know. Say it. It resembles a Ponzi structure. The words felt heavier than the room. How sure are you? Not completely. She never exaggerated, but sure enough to keep looking. She opened another file. We also found evidence Andre lost substantial money in a private investment. When? About 2 years ago. He never recovered. Not legitimately. The pieces began fitting. The emergency loan, the forged paperwork, the lake house. He needs collateral, I said. Yes, so he can survive until the next compliance review. Naomi did not answer. She did not have to. Darkness had already settled by the time I left Walter and Alma's neighborhood. I parked outside their little ranch house and watched the lights through the front window. Alma was laughing about something. Walter smiled, though I doubted he even heard the joke. I called Naomi. I'm done. What? Close everything. Silence. I'm serious. Why? If this explodes... I looked toward the house. Keisha loses everything. The marriage, the house, maybe even the kids. Naomi spoke quietly. You're thinking like a father. I am a father. I know. She waited. Can you also live with becoming Walter's next victim? I did not answer, because I could not. The phone rang just after 8. Elliot. You passed the evaluation. No indication of cognitive impairment whatsoever. I smiled for the first time all week. Good. There is another issue. The smile disappeared. What now? Andre submitted supplemental material. What kind? An affidavit claiming you threatened his family. I stood. That's ridiculous. He included an audio recording. My heartbeat slowed. The dinner? Yes. What does it say? Elliot hesitated. It's edited. My stomach dropped. The recording begins with you saying, too late. I closed my eyes. And the threat involving my grandchildren? Not on the recording. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Andre had not simply lied. He had rewritten the story. Now the court would hear me sounding cold and threatening without ever hearing what had been said first. Unless I could prove otherwise, his version might become the official one. The hardest part was not the lawyers. It was not the paperwork. It was not even wondering whether Andre had forged my signature. The hardest part was Saturday morning, because every Saturday morning for the last 5 years, unless someone was sick or snow closed the roads, Malik and I went fishing together. That morning, I still drove to the bait shop. The clerk looked up from the register. Morning, Mr. Ellis? Morning. The usual worms? I nodded. He handed me the little foam container. Taking Malik out? For a second, I could not answer. No. He did not ask another question. People around Cincinnati were good about that. They usually knew when silence was kinder. I paid, drove home, and put the bait container in the refrigerator. Some irrational part of me kept thinking the phone might ring. Maybe Keisha would call. Maybe Andre would come to his senses. Maybe Malik would somehow show up at my front door carrying his little tackle box. By Sunday evening, the worms were still in the refrigerator. 3 days later, I finally threw them away. That hurt far more than it should have. Life developed a strange rhythm after that. Every morning, I walked the neighborhood. Every Tuesday, I volunteered at the church food pantry. Every Thursday, I mowed my lawn. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. I found myself looking toward the driveway whenever a car slowed in front of the house, checking my phone too often, wondering if Zuri still carried pepper everywhere, wondering if Malik believed what Andre had told him. Some nights I slept 4 hours, some nights 2. One Wednesday morning I realized I had forgotten to eat dinner the night before. Lillian would have noticed immediately. She always did. A week later, I drove to Lexington to meet Terrence Bell. Years ago, he had worked as a regulatory attorney on several investigations I assisted. If anyone understood financial fraud and professional boundaries, it was Terrence. He greeted me with a tired smile. "You look older." "I feel older." "I believe you." We sat in his office overlooking Main Street. After I explained everything, he remained quiet for several seconds. Finally, he folded his hands. "What do you want from me?" "Advice." "Good. I was afraid you'd say influence." "I almost did." He smiled slightly. "I know." I looked at him. "If this really is fraud, it has to be handled properly." "I know." "No shortcuts." "I know." "No calling favors." "I know." He leaned forward. "Jerome, your reputation won't help if it contaminates the investigation." "I understand. If Andre committed crimes, evidence will prove it. If evidence doesn't prove it, then no old friendship should." That was exactly what I needed to hear. Not because it made things easier, because it reminded me who I used to be. Rules mattered, especially when they became inconvenient. As I stood to leave, Terrence stopped me. "One more thing." I turned. "You're not trying to win an argument." "I know. You're trying to protect people." "Yes. Don't confuse those two." Keisha called 3 nights later. Not from her phone, not from the house. There was traffic in the background. A shopping cart rattled somewhere nearby. "Dad." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm here. I can't stay on long." "Are you safe?" "Right now." "Where are you?" "Grocery store parking lot." I closed my eyes. That told me everything. Andre was monitoring the house. "Talk." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what I've signed." "What do you mean?" Andre always handled paperwork. Taxes, school forms, bank documents, investment forms. Her voice cracked. "I trusted him." I leaned against the kitchen counter, thinking of the statement attached to the court filing. "I don't know what I signed," she whispered. "I don't remember signing that statement. Could he have slipped it into something else?" "I think so." Silence settled between us. Then she said something that broke my heart. "I kept telling myself I was protecting the kids." She stopped. "I think I was really protecting myself from admitting who he'd become. I wanted to tell her to leave immediately, to grab the children, to drive straight to my house. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. "Has he ever hit you?" "No." "Threatened you physically?" "No, but—" She hesitated. "He watches everything." "What do you mean?" "He checks my bank account, my phone. He wants receipts. If I buy coffee, he asks why." My grip tightened around the phone. "He says couples shouldn't keep secrets." That was not marriage. That was surveillance. "Dad?" "I'm listening." "If I leave, he says nobody will believe me." I answered slowly. "Listen carefully. I'm texting you the number of a family law attorney. Use a phone Andre doesn't know about. Don't tell anyone, especially him." She sniffled. "Can you fix this?" I stared at Lillian's photograph on the bookshelf. "I can help. I can't promise to fix everything." Another long silence. "I understand." Before hanging up, she whispered, "I'm sorry." The line went dead. 5 days later, I found a plain white envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper folded in half. Blue crayon decorated the corners. My throat tightened before I unfolded it. "Dear Grandpa, I miss fishing with you. Mom cries at night. Dad says you are mad at us. Are you mad at me? Love, Malik." There was a drawing underneath. 2 stick figures, one big and one small, holding fishing rods. I read the letter once, then again. By the 3rd time, I could not see the words clearly. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, not crying exactly, just trying to imagine an 8-year-old wondering whether his grandfather had stopped loving him. Andre had not only taken away visits, He had stolen certainty. He had made a little boy question something that should never be questioned. That was the moment my hesitation ended. The following afternoon, Naomi and Elliot sat in my living room. I placed Malik's letter on the coffee table. Neither spoke. Finally, I did. "We continue." Elliot nodded. "Under 3 conditions," I said. I held up one finger. "Everything stays legal." A second. "Keisha and the children get independent protection." A third. "This is not about humiliating Andre. It is about stopping him." Naomi smiled faintly. That is the answer I was hoping for. The next evening, my phone buzzed. "Keisha. Only one sentence. Check your front porch after dark." At 9, I opened the front door. A plain cardboard file box sat beside the welcome mat. No note. Inside were neatly organized folders. Client account numbers, wire transfer instructions, handwritten loan schedules, emails discussing bridge funding. One page caught my attention immediately. Across the top, someone had written in black marker, "Bridge until review." Below it sat a list of names: Walter and Alma Price, a widow from Keisha's church, 3 retired teachers, a former firefighter. All older people, all trusting people, all depending on Andre. I drove to Naomi's house before sunrise. She spent 2 hours comparing the papers against public filings and account records. Finally, she looked up. "I know what he's doing." "What?" "He isn't finished." She slid one brochure across the table. Elegant gold lettering, a luxury hotel, downtown Cincinnati, retirement wealth seminar, Friday evening, the Netherland Plaza. "He's hosting one more investment seminar," she said. "How many people?" "Enough." She looked at me with the same expression she had worn the day we first met 32 years earlier. Calm, certain. "If those deposits happen," she did not finish. She did not need to. I folded the brochure and slipped it into my jacket. Then that's where this ends. By 6 of Friday evening, the lobby of the Netherland Plaza Hotel looked exactly the way Andre wanted it to look. Elegant, comfortable, trustworthy. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers. A banner outside the ballroom displayed smiling gray-haired couples walking along a beach beneath the words, "Your future should feel secure." I stopped and looked at the sign. The irony was not lost on me. Most people attending that night were not wealthy investors. They were retired teachers, mechanics, nurses, postal workers, veterans, and office managers. People who had spent 40 years doing exactly what they were told. Save consistently. Avoid debt. Plan ahead. Now they were here because someone promised they could finally stop worrying. Andre understood something dangerous. Older people were not buying investments. They were buying peace of mind. That made them vulnerable. Walter stood beside me near the registration table. He wore the same navy sport coat I had seen him wear to church for years. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his name tag. "You sure about this?" I asked. He looked toward the ballroom doors. "No," he smiled weakly, "but Alma told me to stop being stubborn." "How is she?" He looked down. "Some mornings she remembers everything. Some mornings she asks whether our son is coming home from high school. Our children are almost 40. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through tonight." "I hope so." Across the lobby, Naomi pretended to study a brochure while quietly watching people arrive. She was not alone. 2 retirees who had already agreed to cooperate with investigators entered separately, each instructed to behave normally. Nothing about that night resembled the dramatic raids people imagine. No shouting, no hidden theatrics, just careful preparation. Weeks of documentation. Victims finally talking to one another. Investigators who had spent enough time gathering evidence to move legally instead of emotionally. Inside the ballroom, round tables filled the room. Waiters moved with sparkling water and coffee. A large projector displayed colorful charts promising secure income for life. Andre walked confidently between tables, shaking hands. He looked relaxed, polished. Exactly like the successful financial advisor everyone expected. Then he noticed me. For less than a second, surprise crossed his face. It disappeared almost immediately. He recovered well. That had always been one of his strengths. He approached with the same professional smile I had watched him use for years. Jerome, Andre, I wasn't expecting you. I received an invitation. He glanced toward Walter. Interesting guest. Walter looked away. Andre lowered his voice. We can still solve this privately. Can we? The lake house. There it is. He smiled patiently. You know this does not have to become ugly. I looked directly into his eyes. For who? His smile faded. For everyone. No, I shook my head slowly. For you. He stepped closer. If you keep doing this, Keisha loses everything. The house, her security, the children's school. I did not answer. He studied my face. Apparently he expected anger, fear, negotiation. Instead he found silence. After several uncomfortable seconds, he straightened his tie. I gave you every opportunity. No, I answered quietly. You gave yourself several. Then I walked away. At exactly 6:30, Andre stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice filled the ballroom smoothly. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with us. The audience applauded politely. He began exactly as I expected. Stories, statistics, charts, inflation, longer life expectancy, market uncertainty. He never rushed. Good salespeople rarely do. About 20 minutes into the presentation, movement near the ballroom entrance caught my attention. Keisha. She stood quietly just inside the doorway, wearing jeans, a navy sweater, and an expression I had never seen on her before. Not confidence, not fear, resolve. Andre noticed her almost immediately. His smile nearly disappeared. He recovered quickly and continued speaking, but I could see his eyes returning to her every few seconds. When he announced a short break, he walked directly toward her. What are you doing here? His voice stayed low. I came. I told you to stay home. I know. Go. Keisha looked at him for several long seconds. Then she slowly walked across the room, not toward the exit, toward me. She stopped several feet away, eyes full of tears. I'm sorry. I nodded. Andre followed. What are you doing? For years I had watched Keisha apologize simply to end arguments. This time she did not. Instead, she spoke softly enough that only those nearby could hear. I've been leaving for 3 years. Andre stared at her. I'm staying gone this time. His face changed. Not rage, panic, real panic. He reached toward her arm. She stepped backward. No. One simple word. The first time I had ever heard her use it without immediately explaining herself. Andre looked around the room. People were beginning to notice. He forced another smile. We'll discuss this later. Keisha did not move. 5 minutes later, Andre returned to the stage. If he felt shaken, he hid it well. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude, a slide appeared showing projected retirement income. We are offering a limited enrollment opportunity. To simplify the process, our team can complete applications electronically tonight. Assistants began moving through the room carrying tablets. An older gentleman near the front raised his hand. Excuse me, Andre smiled. Yes, sir. Is this fund independently audited? I held my breath. Andre answered without hesitation. Absolutely. Another lie. The man nodded slowly. And client money stays in separate custodial accounts? It always does. Second lie. Clear, public, documented. Naomi quietly looked toward the ballroom entrance. Almost imperceptibly, she nodded once. The ballroom doors opened. Not dramatically, they simply opened. The hotel's event manager entered first. She walked calmly toward the stage. Behind her came 2 men in business suits and a woman carrying a leather portfolio. No flashing lights, no shouting, just quiet professionalism. Andre stopped speaking. The room became strangely silent. The event manager handed him a document. He scanned it quickly. His face drained of color. One of the suited men stepped forward. Mr. Whitfield. Andre looked up. We'd like to speak with you now. Yes. He forced a laugh. This is obviously some misunderstanding. We can discuss that outside. Andre looked toward the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll excuse us. He picked up his laptop bag. Bad decision. The investigator noticed immediately. Sir, please set the bag down. Every conversation in the ballroom ended. Coffee cups paused halfway to mouths. People looked from Andre to the investigators and back again. Andre slowly placed the bag on the floor. Then he saw Keisha standing beside me. His voice rose for the first time all evening. Keisha, she did not answer. Tell them. Silence. Tell them this is not what it looks like. She looked directly at him, then quietly shook her head. The movement lasted less than a second. It said everything. Andre turned toward me. This is your fault. I did not answer. You destroyed your own daughter's family. I walked close enough that only the people nearest us could hear. I could have forgiven the money. His eyes narrowed. But you used my grandchildren. He opened his mouth. I continued before he could speak. That was the one thing you could not take back. He laughed bitterly. You think you won? I looked at him for a long moment. No. I paused. I asked one question. You spent weeks answering it. The investigator gently touched Andre's elbow. We need to go. This time, Andre did not resist. He simply looked around the ballroom one last time. The smiling couples on the presentation screen, the unfinished applications, Keisha, me. Then he walked out. No dramatic struggle, no shouting. Just the sound of dress shoes fading down a hotel hallway. The ballroom remained almost unnaturally quiet. People began speaking in whispers. Several older couples hugged one another. One woman cried softly. Walter squeezed Alma's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. Keisha suddenly sat down. Her shoulders began shaking. I pulled out the chair beside her. She did not look up. Are the kids going to hate me? There was not a kind lie I could tell. They are going to be confused. She nodded silently. They are going to be angry sometimes. Another nod. And they are going to be scared. She finally looked at me. But they will also know who stayed. Outside the hotel, cold autumn air swept across Fountain Square. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Keisha whispered, Can you ever forgive me? I looked toward the Cincinnati skyline glowing against the night. Then back at my daughter. I love you. Tears rolled down her face. That is not the same thing as pretending none of this happened. She closed her eyes, then slowly nodded. For the first time in years, she accepted the truth without trying to explain it away. 10 months later, I was standing on the same dock Andre had tried to take from me. The lake was almost perfectly still. Thin ribbons of morning fog drifted across the water, while first sunlight spilled over the Kentucky hills. For the first time in a long while, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful. Behind me, I heard 2 sets of running footsteps. Grandpa! Malik reached the dock first, nearly tripping over his own tackle box. Zuri followed close behind, clutching Pepper under one arm and wearing a life jacket almost as big as she was. Slow down, I laughed. The fish aren't going anywhere. They might, Malik said seriously. They're fish. You never know. I smiled. That sounded exactly like something I would have said at his age. Life had not magically returned to normal. Real life rarely does. Andre eventually accepted a plea agreement. Wire fraud, investment fraud, forgery, financial exploitation of older adults. The prosecutors explained that a trial could take years and force elderly victims to testify repeatedly. Several of them did not have that kind of time. The agreement was not perfect. Justice rarely is. A court-appointed receiver recovered money from frozen accounts. Andre's business assets were sold. Insurance covered part of the losses. Some investors eventually received meaningful restitution. Others recovered only a fraction of what they had saved over entire lifetimes. Walter and Alma kept their home. Barely. Their retirement would never look the way they planned. When Walter told me that, he shrugged gently. We still wake up together. He squeezed Alma's hand. I've learned that's worth more than any investment statement. I could not argue with that. Keisha rented a small townhouse in Florence, Kentucky. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, and an old maple tree that dropped leaves faster than anyone could rake them. She found part-time work at a dental office while completing medical billing certification in the evenings. Some weeks she looked exhausted. Most weeks she looked determined. I helped where I could, but not the way I would have before. When she needed school supplies for the kids, I bought them directly. When Malik wanted to join Little League, I paid the registration fee. When Zuri's preschool needed tuition, I sent the check to the school. Keisha noticed. One afternoon while we were unloading groceries, she finally said, "You don't trust me with money?" I set a bag on the kitchen counter. "I trust you." She waited. "I don't trust the situation you are recovering from." She looked away. "I guess that's fair. It is not punishment." "I know. It is protection." She nodded slowly. "For all of us." She started seeing a counselor every Tuesday evening. Sometimes she told me about the sessions. Sometimes she did not. There were still difficult conversations. Days when she blamed herself. Days when she quietly blamed me. I understood both. Healing does not move in a straight line. Neither does forgiveness. The biggest decision came in early spring. Everyone assumed I would simply leave the lake house to Keisha. I did not. Elliot prepared a trust instead. The property would belong to Malik and Zuri. An independent trustee, not me and not Keisha, would oversee everything until they became adults. Keisha read the documents carefully, much more carefully than she used to. Then she looked up. "So I can't borrow against it?" "No." "I can't sell it?" "No." "I can't use it as collateral?" "No." She sat quietly for several seconds. "You still don't completely trust me." I folded my hands. "I trust you to become stronger, but I am not going to ask your children to depend on how quickly that happens." She looked disappointed, then thoughtful. Finally, she smiled just a little. "You know what? A year ago, I would have argued with you." "I know. I think you're right." That conversation meant more to me than any courtroom victory, because it was not about property, it was about responsibility. Fishing with Malik felt wonderfully ordinary again, which is exactly what made it special. He carefully baited his own hook now. He still tangled fishing lines sometimes. He still celebrated catching tiny bluegill as though they were world records. One cool Saturday morning, he looked over at me. "Grandpa." "Yeah? Were you some kind of superhero before you retired?" I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my fishing rod. "No." "Really?" "No. Dad always said you could figure anything out." I could not help smiling. "I got paid to read paperwork nobody else wanted to read." He blinked. "That sounds boring." "It usually was." He thought about that, then grinned. "I guess boring saved us." "It helped." He stared at the water again. After a while, he quietly asked, "Were you ever mad at me?" I set my fishing rod across my knees and turned toward him completely. "Never, Malik. Not even a little." I waited until he met my eyes. Not for 1 second. His shoulders relaxed. He leaned gently against my arm. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Sometimes children do not need long speeches. They only need certainty. Around lunchtime, Keisha and Zuri joined us carrying sandwiches and coffee. Keisha handed me a paper cup. "2 sugars," I smiled. "You remembered?" I always remembered. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to wait for me after work and carry my briefcase because she insisted she was helping. People do not disappear completely. Sometimes they are buried beneath fear. We ate together on the dock. Zuri proudly announced she had caught the biggest fish in Kentucky, even though it measured about 6 inches. Malik immediately objected and said his had been at least 7. Their argument lasted almost 15 minutes. Keisha laughed harder than I had heard her laugh in years. Eventually, she grew quiet. "Dad?" "Yeah." "I'm sorry." I smiled gently. "You've said that before." "I know. I'm afraid if I stop saying it." She looked down at her coffee. "You'll think I forgot." I shook my head. "I won't forget." She nodded. "But I don't want forgetting to become the price of moving forward." Tears filled her eyes again. Not from guilt this time. From relief. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Neither of us needed to say anything else. Watching the children argue over fish sizes was enough. People sometimes assume growing older means becoming weaker. I have learned that is only partly true. My knees ache more than they used to. I do not lift heavy things without thinking twice. I read restaurant menus with glasses now. But age also teaches what youth rarely understands: patience, perspective. The difference between keeping peace and surrendering your dignity. Andre believed loneliness would make me accept anything just to stay close to my grandchildren. For one frightening evening, I almost did. Not because I was weak, because I loved them. Love can make good people vulnerable. It can also remind them what is worth protecting. I did not win because I was smarter than Andre. I did not win because I knew the right people. I made it through because I finally stopped negotiating with someone who treated family like leverage instead of a gift. The deed was never the real danger. The real danger was believing fear should decide how much disrespect I had to tolerate. If you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your dignity, you know how painful that decision can be. Thank you for spending your time with me and listening to this story. I hope wherever life finds you today, you remember that kindness and boundaries can exist together.